Hello and welcome to The Place in London. Today I'm going to be talking to Richard Alston, the choreographer, about his work Wildlife, which was made in 1983 for Rambert Dance Company. There's a very particular reason for this, and I'll briefly explain that to you before I turn to Richard and ask him to talk about his choreography. During the autumn of 2011, there was a three-way collaboration between the Dance Umbrella, the theatre department at the Place, and London Contemporary Dance School. Exciting and relatively young choreographers were invited to make new work using Alston's Wildlife as inspiration. These works, which were made with members of EDGE, the postgraduate performance group at London Contemporary Dance School, were presented at the Place as part of the Dance Umbrella season under the programme title Alston Takes Cover. Two of these pieces are now in the EDGE touring programme, enabling the work to reach a much wider audience. At the end of this short film, you'll find much more information about the approach that each choreographer took as they watched Wildlife and allowed their impressions and reflections to influence and permeate their work. The programme notes that they wrote for their first performances are also included there, together with their biographies. By inviting Richard to talk about his original work, we hope to make the new work more accessible. Each choreographer approached the challenge in a very different way, but their starting points were the same. So, Richard, could you tell us now about Wildlife? What do you remember about your approach to making the piece Wildlife all that time ago in 1983?
I think the very starting point was wanting to work with Nigel. Also, we went on an American tour. You were with the company, I remember. We went all over America, and we went to something misleadingly called Iowa City, which is about one street in the middle of a lot of cornfields. But they had a good auditorium there, the Hampshire Auditorium. And in the space outside it, they had a piece by Dick Smith. And that made me remember his work, which I'd seen when I was younger, when he used to exhibit at the Whitechapel. And I remembered the way they used to curve out into the space. So I thought I would really like to look at Dick's work more. And when I did, I found that his work had grown off the wall into these amazing, elaborate kites. And there was a wonderful image of a big yellow one hanging in the big space at the top of the Museum of Modern Art in Oxford, which is a favourite space of mine anyway. So, talking to Nigel about how we could make a piece together, I think it was he who came up with the idea that he would like to use sources from different cultural backgrounds, music that came in a way from all over the world, and he would take these music ideas and give me small, he called them maquettes, so I would have a little idea of the sound world, because we're talking about an era pre-synthesizers, when the problem always for a composer and a choreographer was that the choreographer had no idea how it would sound, and a piano version wasn't really going to hack it. So that's what he did. He brought me the little fanfare that came from somewhere like Borneo, strange little stuttering fanfare. He brought me the bird-catching music, where the children went out in the night and imitated birds in the hope that they would attract birds into these little small cages. He brought me the mbira, the African mbira, and he began to write little sound worlds about this. And so when I was thinking about that, and I was also very mindful of Dick's work, it suddenly seemed to me that Dick's work was like some kind of exotic foliage, some kind of exotic roof of a forest or something. And so then I spoke to Dick. Dick, I remember, came with us to Portugal. We went on a tour of Portugal, and in a hotel room in Lisbon, he started cutting out these little strips of paper and making extraordinary models and putting them on my bed and leaving them there to the astonishment of the maids. And so that's the way this came together. And the reason why I'm describing this was because I don't think I'd ever collaborated that way before. So it felt like the most wonderful three-way conversation. And when I eventually made the dance, my memory is that we made it really quickly.
Yes.
And in particular, because Dick's kites had turned from being sail-like flowing objects into sharp zigzags, it influenced my sense of the visual, what the imagery should be for the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think the movement is sharper, more barbed, more cornered. It was in that sense a true collaboration. So for me, this was incredibly liberating. I can remember at that time we had a director who quite liked dance to be very kind of accessible and popular. And every time we made something with contemporary music, the dancers and I used to feel deliciously subversive. And there was a strong sense of that when we made Wildlife. With Nigel too. We wanted to make no compromises, but we wanted to make music and dance that was edgy but attractive. So it's a long answer, but that's really how Wildlife came into being. It was very different, and it was a turning point for me, I think, and that's why I chose it for this project. I chose it for this project because I didn't want people to imitate the piece. I wanted, and in particular, it's interesting to have talked with Rachel, who used the documentary that was made about the piece, where I think Nigel and Dick Smith and I all spoke with tremendous enthusiasm because we'd all had such a positive experience working together. Even though I was a bit kind of plummy in public school in those days, but still, it's really interesting to hear my voice, in Rachel's piece. I really enjoyed that. But she spoke to me and said that she had found it really exciting to pick up on our enthusiasm, that she found it very inspiring that we were so excited. And Nigel's very coherent, he's a wonderful, wonderful communicator. So I knew there was all this material, not just the piece that was important to me, but also all this background information. And that's why I chose this piece for Undercover.
Yes. Tony Adigun's piece, which he called Unleashed, begins with the dancers in a pose which is actually from the original Wildlife choreography. When he researched the reviews from the 1980s, it was often this pose that he saw photographed, represented in print. And he was fascinated, he said, by how you used constellations and floor patterns. And he brought those things into his own work, obviously in a very different way, using his own specific street style of moving. Did you feel that you recognised elements of your...
Yes, it was very exciting. It was very exciting to see it done so intelligently. Something to be made new by really understanding something in the structure. That was very exciting for me. Choreographers are so illogical. I certainly am. And so the last moment actually came from a Romanesque sculpture. There was a big Romanesque exhibition at the Hayward, as it happened, and I saw this little frieze of little figures, how you see them at the top of columns. And they were all bent and angular and curved over each other, and I loved it, and so I made my own version of that. Under the kite at the end. That's how it sort of settled. And as you know, a year or so later, I made a piece that was a companion piece to another piece of music by Nigel, and it started with that moment. So it was Son of Wildlife, Sansa, and they started with that final pose.
Yes.
But Tony used the structure of the Mbira, crossing from one side to the other, and made it his own, of course, but it was really exciting to see how someone had picked up on a spatial idea and made it completely new and completely fresh.
Yes. Speaking to other people who were in the original work, and also from my own memories, there's a strong sense that whether you meant to or not, you really took us as dancers out of our comfort zones. Do you think that you were aware of that at the time? And maybe was this part of an approach to making something that felt very fresh?
So I don't remember thinking, oh, I'm going to make something which is totally different, because I didn't know that I was. I just remember thinking, oh, this is a bit angular. Oh, I can see why. It's because of the kites, you know. It's because of looking at these little things on the hotel bedroom for 3 days. So I knew that I had a sense of all these jagged marks.
Yes. Are there any other connections that you became aware of or that you particularly enjoyed when you saw this new work?
Rachel's piece, I loved the sense that it was David Attenborough reinvented. It was like a very earnest but hilarious documentary. Very deadpan, and it looked like strange little ethnic folk dances and funny little things attached to them, which were the kites, sort of integral to the costume. I enjoyed that enormously, and I enjoyed the fact that that was there with these rather serious voices over. I thought it had terrific humour, but it wasn't camp. It was. It seemed to have an affection for the piece, so I was grateful, because of course if you put yourself in this position, you could end up with choreographers who actually just take the mickey, you know, or make fun of it. And that's what I loved about these works. I mean, Tony's piece is visually so strong, and he's you know, I think really talented. And it was really, really interesting to see him take his comfort zone, if you like, his background, his movement language, and place it somewhere quite different and make something so strong. So I found that really exciting.